Richard Miley.
I don't need it.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and spell your last name?
Richard Miley, M-E-I-L-Y.
And how are you employed, Mr. Miley?
I'm the business manager of the district.
And how long have you held that position?
Approximately 8 years.
And what does your position entail?
Oversee the district's finances.
I'd like you in the thick binder in front of you to turn, please, to tab 18, which is the petty cash policy. Are you familiar with this policy?
I am.
Okay, when did you first become aware of it?
Probably shortly after I was hired.
I'd like you to look down under paragraph 4. You see the sentence that says, "All petty cash funds shall be closed out for audit at the end of the school year"?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Whose responsibility in the district is it to perform that audit?
That would be mine.
Okay. Did you ever perform an audit of petty cash at Juniata High School?
Yes, I did.
When did you?
Annually.
And from whom did you get the information to perform that audit?
There was no information to get. It was probably the easiest thing to reconcile an audit because there was no petty cash account. There was no activity. As petty cash has been presented here, it appears that it's student activity money or money that never made it to the district office as it was intended to.
Did you make specific inquiries of anyone as to whether there had been any petty cash activity in the years that you say there was nothing?
I didn't have to make any inquiries. I can look in the system and easily see.
So you never asked a human being in the 8 years you worked for the district if there was any petty cash activity at Juniata High School?
No.
Well, what are generally accepted accounting practices for conducting an audit?
You reconcile your accounts and make sure that everything's in order.
And are you testifying that there is no requirement of any human interaction in putting together an audit?
Sure, there's human interaction.
Why did you not ask any human being in 8 years about any petty cash activity at Juniata High School?
Because there was no petty cash at Juniata High School.
Was there petty cash at East Juniata?
Yes, there was.
Did it ever strike you as odd that you were seeing activity at East Juniata but not at Juniata?
The majority of the activity at East Juniata concerning their petty cash account was for postage, as was, as Mr. Fossey testified to. At Juniata, they did purchase orders to the U.S. Postmaster for postage. So one would assume that they just didn't have a need for petty cash. And as a business manager, I don't go around promoting people to spend money, so if they're not asking for any, that makes me happy.
So it was your understanding that there was no petty cash at East Juniata at all?
East Juniata, yes, they had petty cash.
They had petty cash.
Yes, I said they did.
But you're saying the fact that you had no entry for petty cash at Juniata did not strike you as unusual?
No, because they were
Look,
wanting their.
been asked and
postage
answered,
by
excuse
another-
me, just a minute,
by another-
Mr. Miley, stop. Asked and answered, let's move on, I don't want to get into arguments.
What physical record, if any, did you create about there being no petty cash fund at Juniata High School?
It's a balance sheet account, and it appears on all our financial statements. So, you know, it's generated from our financial system.
And you literally entered zero on that line?
I didn't have to enter zero, I didn't have to do anything. It started at zero and it never changed in 8 years.
Is it your testimony that you were unaware that any petty cash at all was being handled at Juniata High School
Correct?
in 8 years?
8 years?
No other questions, thank you.
Cross-examination?
No questions.
I have no questions, does the board have any questions? Thank you, Mr. Miley, you may step down, next witness.
We call Danny Snyder.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Danny Roy Snyder, S-N-Y-D-E-R.
When was the first time it was brought to your attention that there was a concern about the removal of any property from any district buildings by Mr. Apple?
I would say it was the end of January, 23rd,
Of 2019?
2019.
I should have asked this before, but am I correct, you currently serve as the president of the school board?
I do?
And you have since before January 1st, 2019, correct?
Yes.
And how did you become aware on January 23rd, 2019, that anyone was asking a question about Mr. Apple having moved any school furniture?
We had a phone call to, about Mr. Yager and some things that he was doing that, could be illegal against school district policy. So we had a meeting, and at the very tail end, got in, just like the last 5 minutes, Mr. Apple's name came up.
At that time, was he the subject of the investigation, or was it Dr. Yarger?
Dr. Yager.
Am I correct that you have participated in an investigation by the Pennsylvania State Police into allegations against Mr. Apple?
Can you clarify what you're saying?
Am I correct that you've spoken with one or more members of the Pennsylvania State Police in connection with a criminal investigation into Mr. Apple?
I did meet with the Pennsylvania State Police.
And what prompted you to meet with the state police?
The state police called me and asked.
And when was that?
That would have been, right about a week into March. Week or two, estimate.
Have you heard any of the testimony that Dr. Everett gave or Mr. Apple gave about the meetings they had February 4th and February 11th?
I have sitting in the back.
And did you speak with Dr. Everett prior to him meeting with Mr. Apple on February 4th?
February 4th?
Yes.
Yes, he was in the meeting on January 23rd.
Did you speak to Dr. Eder about any investigation Dr. Eder would be taking into Mr. Apple?
Not at that time.
When did you for the first time?
I would say about sometime at the end of January, beginning of February.
Did Dr. Eder communicate with you at all about an intention to present to Mr. Apple an agreement for him to sign by which he would take a 5-day unpaid suspension?
No.
Did you have any discussions with Dr. Eder that he'd be presenting anything to Mr. Apple to sign?
No.
When did you first learn that this document had been created about a 5-day unpaid suspension?
Right before a board meeting.
Do you recall when that board meeting was held?
I don't recall which date it was.
Is it your testimony today that you were not aware of this agreement until after it was signed?
That is correct.
But you were aware Dr. Eder was conducting an investigation, correct?
Correct.
And you were aware that he was going to, well, let me ask you this question. At this point, was Dr. Yarger still serving as the superintendent of the school district?
For which, I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
By whose authority was Dr. Eder acting when he was conducting this investigation?
The board asked to go and investigate the findings and see Mr. Yager and see what he can come up with.
So
Interview
Dr.
people,
I'm sorry, I didn't catch into that.
and interview people.
Thank you.
I believe you just said Dr. Yarger, is that correct?
Mr. Eder. Mr. Eder was asked to investigate Dr. Yager.
Did you authorize Dr. Eder's investigation?
Yes,
Could you clarify what investigation you're, again, I think that's part of the confusion.
Did you authorize Dr. Eder's investigation, Mr. Apple?
Mr. Apple,
Yes.
that was findings. Later, we authorized him to go and research Dr. Yager, and find out about his wrongdoings.
Are you then saying that you did not authorize Dr. Eder to investigate Mr. Apple? Is that what you're saying?
We first asked him to look into Dr. Yager. And as he was investigating Dr. Yager, Mr. Apple's name started to appear. So, yes, he started looking into Mr. Apple.
And that was prior to Dr. Eder meeting with Mr. Apple, correct?
I'm not sure when the first time he met with Mr. Apple.
I don't have any other questions.
Any cross? I have no questions. Any questions from the board? Thank you, sir. You may step down. Next witness.
Call ahead with trial, please.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Mr. Alvarez, would you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Heather Nicole Drivovich, Drevels.
And how are you employed?
I'm the certified school nurse at Juniata High School, Tuscarora Junior High School, Shade Mountain Christian School, and the Juniata County Homeschool Program.
And how often are you on site at Juniata High School?
4 out of 5 days a week.
And are you familiar at all with the handling of petty cash at Juniata High School?
Yes.
And well, first of all, I don't know if I asked, how many years have you been at the high school?
17.
Okay. And what are you familiar with as to the handling of petty cash at the high school?
From my standpoint, if I needed something in the nurse's office, I've mostly used it for diabetic supplies if I ran out of juice or crackers or snacks. we've used it for students who might have had an accident or needed to change clothes, needed clean underwear or socks from the dollar store. And, if I would need to use funds for something like that, I would contact Sabrina Shipp, the secretary,
And how would you present that request to Sabrina Shipp?
verbally.
And how would she respond typically?
Okay. I mean, she would get the money, and sometimes she would go to the store or, make arrangements for somebody.
And the needs that you then had for the students would be provided through that money, is that right?
Correct.
Did you ever witness Mr. Apple handling any of that money?
No.
Best of your knowledge, did he have control over that money?
From my standpoint, every time I needed something, I went through the secretary.
Did you interact with Ms. Shipp with respect to attendance issues?
Yes.
And what was the nature of your interaction with her?
When the district went to the ASAP computer system that they now use, the nurses did not move to that system as well because we were still calling our own substitutes. So she would do my attendance in the computer.
And when you say she would do your attendance in the computer, what does that mean? Was she entering every day?
When I was gonna be absent, she would enter, when I was not in the building, on days off her, when I was absent.
And how would she know to do that?
We have gold slips that we use sometimes I would tell her verbally.
And when you would tell her verbally, what would you say?
It depended. Most times I would use a gold slip, but I was the only employee in the building still using a gold slip. And she had told me that it was mainly important to use a gold slip if I was getting the substitutes, because that's how they tracked how substitutes were paid. So if I didn't need a substitute, oftentimes I just told her what I was doing. Like if I was coming down to the junior high to do dentals for the morning, I would let her know verbally.
And when you would give her these indications for time you'd be off, was she always accurate in entering it?
There were a few occasions, I believe two that I recall, and one I know when I was at Shade Mountain Christian School for a day, I was credited with a sick day instead of, it should have been marked under other in the computer system, and I was credited with using a sick day for the day.
And was there another incident also?
I believe there was two such incidents similar to that.
And was there a time when the gold slip system changed in the district?
Yes.
And-
They went to every other employee in the district except for the nurses. They started entering their own attendance into the system, but the nurses were still using the gold slips because we were still calling our own substitutes. We weren't using the same system.
Do you have any personal familiarity with the way in which Mr. Apple's attendance would have been marked?
I know that, so I think Mr. Apple and I were the only two employees in the building that Sabrina still, and probably the assistant principal that Sabrina still kept track of.
Okay, thank you. No other question.
Cross?
Yes, Ms. Driverless. With regard to the petty cash usage, you weren't at the luncheon for Mr. Apple's birthday on June 19th of 2018, correct?
Correct.
You have no personal knowledge as to what happened or did not happen that day with regard to the use of petty cash, correct?
Correct.
Similarly, you weren't around when Mr. Apple either did or did not tell Sabrina Shipp that he was not coming back to school after the luncheon that day, correct? Were you ever made aware by Mr. Apple of policy 617, the petty cash policy?
No.
And did Mr. Apple have responsibility ultimately to approve your attendance records?
I'm not sure.
your immediate supervisor?
Yes,
And did he evaluate you?
yes,
And did he keep track whether you were missing any work?
probably.
No other questions?
Any redirect?
No, thank you.
I just have a clarifying question. Am I correct that there were no occasions where you told Ms. Shipp that you were gonna be absent and she failed to mark down any kind of absence, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Board have any questions? You may step down, thank you. Please call your next witness.
We call it Kurt Condo.
Please raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Please state your full name, spell your last name,
Kurt Brian Condo, C-O-N-D-O,
and how are you employed, Mr. Condo?
school counselor, Juniata High School.
And in connection with your work as a school counselor, do you have any involvement with athletics also?
Yes, I coach football and I used to coach wrestling.
How many years have you been an athletic coach?
Since my employment here, 2002,
Did you ever have occasion in the fall of 2018, summer or fall of 2018, to speak with Mr. Apple about concessions?
we've had a lot of conversations.
Did he say anything to you about the concession situation on the field and any changes that might be made?
And I think, yeah, it's always been a consensus that the concessions weren't up to par with some of our other facilities that we visited over the years.
And specifically with not being up to par, what are you describing when you say this?
Just the overall looks of it, the overall functionality of it.
Did he state to you in the fall or summer of 2018 any ideas as to how to improve that?
I know we've talked or had conversations in the past about having a larger facility down there to like a field house type thing, with concession stands, with locker rooms, with restrooms, and everything else.
Well, any discussion about moving a shed onto the property?
Yes,
And did a shed in fact get moved onto the property?
I think that's the band shed, yes.
Okay. And has that been used? Just curious, has that been used yet?
First game's Friday night.
Okay. Will it be used Friday night? Is that the plan?
Yeah.
Do you understand whether that's the shed that Mr. Apple was hoping to get moved onto the property?
I'm not sure if that's the shed that he was hoping to get moved. I'm not aware of what shed was supposed to be moved. I know there was a shed moved there.
Okay. Do you recall what time during the school year that was moved there?
I don't recall, just from all the testimonies here, I'm guessing it was right around the time.
Sir, you don't need to guess.
Okay.
If you know the answer, you can answer.
No, I don't recall. I wasn't paying attention.
Are you aware what's in the shed?
No.
You haven't been in it yourself?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Don't have any other questions.
Any cross?
Just one, Mr. Condo, after January 1st of 2019 or January 12th of 2019, did Mr. Apple come to you and say that he had items secured at his property, in his truck, or at his residence that he wanted to use for the concession stand for boosters?
No.
No other questions?
Board, any clarifying questions? Thank you, sir. You may step down. Please call your next witness.
Call Steve Drabble, please.
Please raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So help you God.
Would you please state your full name and spell your last name?
Stephen Daniel Dreibelbis, D-R-E-I-B-E-L-B-I-S.
And Are you presently retired, is that right?
I've been retired for 15 years, going on 16.
And prior to your retirement, what did you do for employment?
I was hired as a social studies teacher and assistant football coach in July of 1969. And after,
Let me stop, that was in this district?
yes, right here in Juniata, at Juniata High School. I was the head baseball coach for 25 years. I became the assistant principal about 1986, and I think I served the 11 years in that capacity. And at the same time, 12 years as athletic director. I didn't drive the bus, though. I refused to do that.
All right, did you become principal at Juniata High School at some point?
I became principal at Juniata High School about 1985 or 86 until I retired in 2004.
And at what time during that period did Mr. Apple come on?
I think Mr. Apple was my assistant principal my last 5 years, so about 99 through 2004.
And was he the only assistant principal in the building, or were there others?
No, he was the only assistant principal.
During the 5 years that you worked together, was there any sort of petty cash fund maintained in the high school?
Yeah, there always was a type of petty cash fund. When I first started, the secretary referred to it as mousy. And I'll try to explain why it was created. Money was very tight. We had a summer work program. For instance, if you were doing a painting project and needed a quart of paint, you went to the building principal, told him what you needed. He had his secretary type up a purchase order. Purchase order was then sent to the district office. Probably went to a business manager first and then required the signature of the superintendent. It was then sent back to the building principal, and it took about 3 or 4 days to get a quart of paint or even a bolt. So I think my predecessor found it necessary to have a little bit of a liquid fund, and the secretary called it mousy. I think I first became aware of that when I was athletic director, was reconciling the funds after a football game, and I was like $5 short. I'm a little bit concerned because the state auditors wanted us to keep track of ticket numbers and reconcile it with the actual cash that came in and so on. And I remember I had gone to the secretary and I said, Bev, I'm $5 short. What am I going to do? And she said, oh, we have it in mousy. She said, I'll take care of it. We'll just balance it. And that's primarily, as far as I remember, how the fund was financed. If we had an extra dollar, it went in the fund. If we needed an extra dollar, it came out of the fund, that type of thing. A little bit later, when we started student passes, student parking permissions and so on, some of that money went in it. I would think possibly if a student came in, a graduate student, a student that had graduated.
It's okay.
Okay.
You're loud, that's good.
Some of that transcript money would go into the fund and so on. It usually did not get very large. I would say the fund was somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe $50 to at the most possibly $200.
And what was the money then used for? You described it there being new sources of income. What was that being used for?
It was used for a variety of things, generally for students. I was big on perfect attendance. I personally had perfect attendance in school for 12 years. And I thought that was quite an honor for a student to have perfect attendance. So we started an award system where when students in our building had perfect attendance, we purchased awards for them. I remember once or twice we had fire victims and we donated some money to a student fund for a situation like that and so on. I remember one time, I don't remember if it was the beginning of the year or the end of the year, I said to the secretary, I said, Bev, I need to get donuts for the faculty for the first day of school. If I give you money, can you go to the store and get donuts? And she said, sure, I can go get them.
Now you're getting a little fast. She said, sure.
Yeah, she said, sure, but we can take the money out of mousy. And that's what it was called. I think a formal policy maybe was created around 2004, my last year as principal, possibly a year or two before that. Again, going to the questions I've heard asked and so on, no one ever asked to reconcile this with with our account or who was monitoring the account. It was primarily the secretary. And by the way, we didn't have a safe at that time either. There was just a locked door, a locked room where filing cabinets were kept for students that had graduated and so on. And it was, the money was kept in one of the drawers. I think I only saw it one time myself.
So if you only saw it one time yourself, who was actually overseeing it at that point?
The secretary.
You made reference to policy coming in near the end of when you were principal. Did any process or procedures change when that policy was adopted?
No. And no one ever went over the policy. No one in the administration or the board or anybody like that ever said, oh, here's the policy, you need to look at this, you need to be aware of it, you need to monitor. There was never any discussion about a petty cash fund.
How about from the business manager or the superintendent?
No.
Thank you. No other questions?
Any cross?
Were there any other policies that those individuals would have had to make you aware of specifically?
I'm sure there were.
And that the petty cash policy that's in question for this was adopted August 19, 2004. Were you retired by that point?
I retired at the end of August of 2004.
No other questions?
Board, any questions? Thank you, sir. You may step down. Please call your next witness.
We call Shane Varner.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Thank you.
Please state your full name and spell your last name.
Shane Denton Varner, V-A-R-N-E-R.
And Mr. Varner,
Can I have the middle name again, please?
Denton, D-E-N-T-O-N.
and Mr. Varner, how are you employed?
I'm employed with the state of Pennsylvania
And do you know Ed Apple?
very well,
How long have you known him?
35 plus years.
And I'm going to ask you about his reputation for truthfulness. Do you know his reputation in the community?
Very well.
What is his reputation in the community?
By the book, honest, loyal, trustworthy is a term that comes to mind.
And where do you live?
Mifflintown, Pennsylvania,
Have you lived in, how long have you lived in Juniata County?
50 years.
I think you understand he's accused of several things, crimes in the nature of theft and other dishonesty.
I am aware.
Is that consistent or inconsistent with his reputation in the community as you know it?
Very inconsistent.
Thank you. No other questions?
Any cross? Just clarification, you are not Trooper Varner, correct?
I am not Trooper Varner.
Thank you. Board, have any questions? Thank you. You may step down, sir. Please call your next witness.
We call Jim Hartzell.
Please raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I
So
do.
help you God.
Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
James Leon Hartzell, Hartzell.
And are you currently employed?
No, I'm retired.
Okay. What did you do before you retired?
I had an electronics store in the neighborhood here for 40 years.
Here in Juniata County?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the operations of the school district?
Yes, I was a school board member from 2004 to 2008.
And during that time period, did you have occasion to interact with Mr. Apple as principal?
Yes, I did.
And in your position as a store owner in the county and on the board, do you have an opinion, and do you have knowledge as to his reputation for being truthful or untruthful in the community?
Yes, I needed a go-to person when I was on the board who understood everything about the district policies and how everything worked. And I got to know him, and found that he was the most knowledgeable person in the district at the time I was on the board.
And as I asked Mr. Varner this question, but I think as you're aware, he stands accused of theft, of dishonesty, of intentionally false statements submitted in a court proceeding. Are those accusations consistent or inconsistent with his reputation for truthfulness?
I heard that first from my wife, and she heard it at church. And I said, that's not the Mr. Apple I know. He is not that type of person whatsoever.
And how about his reputation in the community? What's the nature of that reputation?
He's a very upright man, and he cares more about the students of this county than anyone in the administration, period.
Thank you. No other questions?
Cross? Any board questions? Thank you, sir. If you step down, please call your next witness.
Thank you. We have no other witnesses.
Was there a stipulation you wanted to suggest?
Yes.
May I characterize it?
Yes.
All right. Just so the audience and the board knows, council have agreed to a stipulation concerning a topic that I raised last time about a separate employee and purported wrongdoing that has nothing to do with this matter, and they agreed to enter that information by stipulation, and they will do so following this hearing. Correct, sir?
Correct.
I'd like to mention at this time also that I've spoken with Mr. Neff, and he doesn't object to me amending our exhibit booklet to add in number 8. So I'd like to give that to all the board members.
Sure. What can you describe what it is?
Yes, this is the court order that ended the separate court action.
All right. Does it include the stipulation with it?
It makes reference, it does not include the stipulation, it makes reference to the stipulation. I have no problem submitting that also.
Yeah, I think it should include the stipulation as well. So I'll make sure the board gets it. You can distribute what you have, and I'll make sure to supplement it with the stipulation. Is that correct, Mr. Net? No
Yes,
objection?
and I'm absolutely fine with the whole thing.
So do you want to move for admission of exhibits then?
Yes.
I don't think you, I don't remember you mentioned number 7.
No, there's no reference to 7, so that, we're not moving that, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now 8.
Any objection?
4 and 6 are already in my book, so that.
Any objection to that? Okay, then Mr. Apple, exhibits 1 through 6 and number 8 are admitted. Do you have any rebuttal witnesses?
No.
And we are done with witnesses. As I explained last time, we are now going to have oral argument by counsel. We'll take a 5-minute break. I'd like each attorney to try to keep their comments no more than 15 minutes, even shorter if that's possible, but unless either of you think that's a ridiculously short period of time, I think it's sufficient.
I'd like to ask, what is your preference in terms of order for the closings?
I would normally have the teachers, the professional employee go first on the closing, but it doesn't matter to me.
Will there be rebuttal, or is it just one-on-one?
Just one-on-one. Do you have any objection to that?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right, so we'll take a 5-minute break.